Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, you have my blank Game Week 18 transfer plans. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you enjoyed today's video, please do smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I'm recording this very late on Sunday evening, ready for a Monday morning upload. And the first and most important thing, I hope you have a cracking week. I hope you achieve everything you set out to. And I hope you do it with a smile on your face as well. So positive vibes, hope you have a fantastic week. But around Game Week 17, it is now ended, although it kind of hasn't, because FPL have had to keep Game Week 17 open, whilst the Premier League and also Fantasy Premier League decide what is happening with the Bournemouth and Luton game, and therefore the points for the players in that game. The most important thing, I hope Tom Lockyer makes a full and speedy recovery. My thoughts going out to him and his family. But around the points, there's not really much benefit in me hypothesizing, because the Premier League will do what they have to, and then Fantasy Premier League will react based on that. There will be people that are happy, and there will be people that are unhappy, but I don't know any players from that game anyway. And even if you do, I think the best thing you've got to do is just sit back, wait, and the Premier League and Fantasy Premier League will make that announcement when they're ready. So for now, I'm not really going to discuss it throughout this video, but do let me know down below if you have been affected by the points, and if you have Solanke in your team, let me know what you think will happen with that. For Game Week 17, regardless of what happens there, I should be on a green arrow. So I finished on 61 points, and at the moment, based on Solanke getting 6 points, not 9, I'm on 377k. But like I said, regardless, it should be a small green arrow despite what happens there. And it was a very interesting game week. And I think at the moment in FPL, I'm starting to get to grips a little bit with it again, because I felt like the first few games of the season I was doing okay. And then I kind of lost my way a bit. And it was a mixture of me making bad decisions in FPL, but also me just struggling to work out what was happening with the game, but also with the Premier League as well. I was finding it very difficult to predict clean sheets, which teams would score goals, which players would perform. And my advice, I think, maintained a decent, respectable level of quality. But I feel like recently in the last few weeks, I've started to be able to predict a lot more what's going to be happening with clean sheets. I'm even starting to get to grips with which teams I expect to keep clean sheets. The data is starting to become a little bit more predictable. Player returns are becoming more predictable as well. And as a result, based on that, I'm starting to get a few green arrows. But clean sheets in particular, whilst I still think there will be less this season, some teams and some players are starting to emerge as decent options now, and Dubravka and Newcastle once again looked very good. Of course, the Raul Jimenez sending off helped them massively, but they didn't concede much XG before that, and I think they, for the most part, dominated that game. And that is what we know of Newcastle at home. Newcastle at home are fantastic. And it was really nice to get a clean sheet from my goalkeeper, because it doesn't happen very often in FPL this season. Pau Torres, Aston Villa, are great at home. They're not as great away from home, but as we'll discuss in the next section, they were maybe a little bit unlucky to concede, because for the most part, they didn't concede many chances in that game. So a little bit unfortunate there. But I always knew when I brought in Pau Torres that there was a good chance he didn't keep a clean sheet against Brentford. I wanted him for Game Week 18 and Game Week 20 against Sheffield United and Burnley. But Pau Torres 2-pointer, that is what it is. And then I got clean sheets and bonus points from both Tsimikas and Porro. And again, these were two games where I predicted clean sheets. If you watch the deadline stream, I said there's no way you bench Tsimikas. They will never concede to Manchester United. And again, that's the way that game went. But also Pedro Porro. I actually predicted on the deadline stream Spurs to win 2-0. I don't think Spurs would score many goals, but I also don't think they will concede many. And yes, Porro was lucky to get the clean sheet, but he was also slightly unlucky not to get an attacking return, which again we'll cover in the next section. So Porro continues to be a good option, because I think Spurs will keep clean sheets. They're not going to keep a lot of them, but they will still keep some. And on top of that, he does have the attacking threat. But to get Dubravka, Porro, and Tsimikas clean sheets was great. I, of course, don't own an Arsenal defender, so every time they keep a clean sheet, that does hurt me massively. And I'll be honest, it is not a mistake not having one, because I've not necessarily had the moves other than last week when I went for Pau Torres, but I still back the decision-making there, which we'll discuss in the next section. But every time Arsenal keep a clean sheet, that does hurt me. And I think longer term, I really do need an Arsenal defender in my team. That is a massive spot that I'm missing here, because they are still the best defence in the league. So Arsenal defender definitely on the wish list, but probably not for Game Week 18 when they play against Liverpool. The midfield was actually really disappointing this week outside of Cole Palmer. Saka, Son, Salah and Martinelli all blanked. Saka and Martinelli arguably the two unluckiest on this list to blank, because they actually created a hell of a lot against Brighton, and we'll discuss that in the next section. So they came away with 3 points apiece. I never thought this was a particularly great game for Heung-min Son anyway. I think away at the City ground, it's not a particularly expansive game. It doesn't scream out lots and lots of returns for Heung-min Son. So I maybe wanted slightly more than 2 points, but I wasn't expecting this to be a massive haul from him. and maybe slightly disappointing not to get more. Salah, very disappointed not to get more because Manchester United have been so poor. And to be honest, Liverpool had the chances in this game. I don't think Salah or Darwin deserved a massive haul here, but they both had their chances. And I think on another day, if Liverpool score one of their early chances, we talk about a little bit on this channel game state. And what people don't realise is, yeah, you can look at the XG and say, let's say Liverpool got 2 XG. That doesn't tell the whole story because let's say Liverpool score one of their shots in the first 10 minutes. That could become an absolute massacre. And we've seen it in the past with Manchester United, especially at Anfield. So they really needed to put away one of their earlier chances. And the longer the game goes on where they're not scoring, the more confidence that Manchester United gain, although it didn't really help them, and the less confidence those Liverpool attackers have. So they needed to score early, and they unfortunately didn't for Liverpool. For Man United, it was great, which meant that Salah and Darwin did disappoint a little bit. So to only get 4 points between them, not including captaincy, very, very disappointing, especially when we predicted this to be a game where Liverpool could score 4, 5, or 6 goals. Darwin is annoying me more than you could possibly imagine. I do love owning Darwin in FPL, but there is a certain limit that every human being has, and I've owned Darwin since game week 8, and when I dropped Haaland, my team's actually done okay. I mean, look at my rank. I started at 3.4. We're not going to get into the Haaland discussion anymore, but Darwin was one of the major advantages of going without Haaland. I had the extra striker spot, and I had the money to go for him, and my God, he's had the chances, but he's just not doing it. And he's gone back to what we saw of Darwin from last season, and as a result, he's a player that I just don't really want to own anymore at the moment. We'll go back to the midfield. Palmer, very, very positive. Actually, we'll discuss in the next section some ridiculous data for game week 17. To get a goal and an assist is great, but he arguably could have come away with even more. And he was incredibly impressive. And he still feels like ridiculous value. To be on penalties, some set pieces, and playing in an attack with fixtures coming up where you expect a lot of goals. If you don't own Palmer already, I still think he's a great buy. I know he's on 4 yellow cards, but he just feels like silly value. And even once then the 4 yellow cards go, maybe he picks up a 5th, gets suspended, whatever. I don't think it really matters because the value is there. So Cole Palmer, the absolute star of the game week, and definitely saved me from a big red arrow. Alvarez can go into the bin with Darwin because both of them are so frustrating. And again, I looked at my front three for this week and I was like, Darwin against United, Alvarez against Palace. Oh my God, I'm in for a monster score. And they just both keep annoying me so much. They get chances, both of them. They're just not finishing them. So on another day, I'm sure they could have both got something, but they're just not doing it at the moment. And both of them are definitely on the chopping block. And then the final player to discuss is Ollie Watkins. 9 points was great. He's so reliable. He's just been so good this season. And again, going into game week 18, arguably the best captaincy option, but really, really delighted to get another 9 points from Ollie Watkins. So that was the team in game week 17, 61 points. Looks like it will be a green arrow of some kind, dependent upon what happens with the Bournemouth and Luton game. Let's now take a look at some interesting stats from game week 17 and my team and transfer plans ahead of game week 18. So guys, can I actually ask for a quick early Christmas present? If you're watching this right now and you're not yet subscribed to the channel, and especially if you've watched a few of my videos before, can I please ask you to consider subscribing? I set a goal for the end of the year for 110,000 subscribers. We're just over 2,000 away, which is probably quite optimistic to hit it now. But if you are watching this and you've not yet subscribed, please do consider doing so as a Christmas present to me. I would really appreciate it. And something that I'm trying to do with these videos is always improve them. So if there are any things that you want me to improve, let me know. But I thought an interesting section that we could chuck in is some statistics from the previous game week that stand out to me. Maybe from a specific player, a specific team, and just interesting things that you might not have considered, which may affect the way we think about stuff moving forward. Now, stats should always be considered over a longer sample size than one game week, but it's just interesting to look at some stuff that stands out. So the first, as I sort of hinted at in the previous section, is that Palmer actually accumulated the highest expected goal involvement of the game week at 1.4. And it was interesting because at half time, I think he was on like 0.03 or something. So the first half, nothing. The second half, remarkable. And Chelsea in particular really improved in that second half. But as I said, this is non-penalty, by the way, of course, because he didn't get a penalty. Palmer, regardless of the pens, is just a really good value option. And if you don't own him, like I said, I would ignore the yellow cards. I'd just get him in because he's just going to continue going up in price. And whilst even if he was up at 6.57, he would still be a great option. You want to get on him as early as possible and accumulate some of that value in him. So Palmer continues to be a really, really nice option. I've got now 2 stats around Aston Villa. The first is that Alex Moreno had the second highest expected goal involvement of all defenders in game week 17 at 0.73. By the way, Dan Burn was top with 1.2 or 1.3. He actually had 2 big chances and over 1 XG. So, like, Dan Burn was a monster, and maybe we'll discuss Dan Burn in the coming weeks, whether he's now an option again. But Alex Moreno in second at 0.73, I think Alex Moreno will be a massive bandwagon at some point. The only issue is Luca Dean has also been pretty decent this season, and they have the option to rotate Alex Moreno a bit. But when Moreno's fit, he's up there in the top 5 defenders in the league for me from an attacking perspective, and he's playing in a really good defence in Aston Villa too. So I think at some point, whether it's a Luca Dean injury or maybe Moreno just looks really, really nailed, I think he will be in a lot of our teams. And in and around that, Aston Villa, and this is a little bit of me justifying the Pau Torres pick as well. Aston Villa actually had lower expected goals conceded than Arsenal, West Ham, and Everton. So I know a lot of the other teams kept clean sheets, and Aston Villa didn't, but maybe a little bit unlucky there. It was a good finish as well from Brentford, but they still defended fairly well, even away from home, and we've seen in recent weeks that they are very, very good at home as well. So I think the Aston Villa defence are worth investing in. I think it's a bit of a shame we probably can't move for Moreno yet, unless you want to take a big risk. But Pau Torres, assuming he's fit, because there are rumours he came off with an injury, or Ezri Konsa, or even Emi Martinez, if you're looking for a goalkeeper, could all be great options. And I would still be willing to invest in the Aston Villa defence, especially when you look at their fixtures coming up. Another point around the defenders, Trent and Porro both had over 0.7 XGI in Game Week 17, very close to Moreno in second. This is just to say, at the moment, and this is a fairly obvious point, Trent and Porro probably are the 2 best defenders to own in FPL, alongside Kieran Trippier. I know he was suspended in Game Week 16, or sorry, Game Week 17, and I know that Newcastle have struggled a little bit recently, but Trippier is still right up there. But Trent and Porro are just ridiculous. The attacking data is so good. And Liverpool in particular are still defending quite well. And I was a little bit hesitant on Trent because of his price and the fixtures coming up. But I do wonder, is he just going to continue putting up this data? And if he is, the clean sheets, they always matter, but maybe they matter a lot less than normal. So Trent, great. Porro in particular, such great value. If you've not got him yet, you haven't missed the boat. I would still get on Pedro Porro personally. As I said in the first section, Martinelli and Saka are a little bit unlucky to come away with nothing. They both accumulated the 3rd and 4th highest expected assists, both above, again, 0.7 expected assists in Game Week 17. Very, very creative. Unlucky not to get more. Martinelli's starting to show signs of what he's shown in previous seasons, and I own Martinelli, so it's a difficult decision as to what to do with him moving forward. Saka unlucky not to get anything. It was actually one of his better expected data performances of the season. So both Martinelli and Saka, I wouldn't be overly worried with them. Of course, you couldn't look to move on to Martinelli, but I think Saka in particular, keep him. He's looking more and more himself over recent weeks. His data's been very strong too, and the fixtures coming up for Arsenal after Game Week 18 are actually quite nice. So I wouldn't be too worried about the Arsenal attack at the moment. And then the last stat here is Man City's XG versus Crystal Palace's XG. So it was Man City's was 1.61 and Palace was 1.82. And I know a little bit skewed by what happened at the back end of the game, but Man City continue to underwhelm, both from an attacking and a defensive perspective. They aren't creating the number of chances required to put teams to the sword, and they are conceding far too many chances to keep clean sheets. And even when they don't, they just find a way to concede. So I'm not really that interested in Man City at the moment. I've been saying this for weeks, but I've somehow held on to Alvarez. Even once Haaland's back, Haaland's fine. Haaland's a great option. He'll continue to have great data. But outside of that, Foden's been disappointing. Alvarez has been disappointing. The defence, like I said, just find ways to concede. Really, really worrying signs for Man City. And in fact, they've only won 1 from their last 6 Premier League games. So, a little bit worrying there for Man City. Maybe they'll improve it soon. And this does tend to be the time they go on a really good run. But these are not very promising numbers. So, those are some stats that I picked out from Game Week 17. Let me know if you want to continue seeing this section. But let's now take a look at my team ahead of blank Game Week 18. So guys, this is my team currently ahead of blank Game Week 18, which to be honest isn't really much of a blank now because most of us have sold in Burmo and Haaland. And outside of that, you probably don't own many players from Man City and Brentford. But let's still call it blank Game Week 18. I've currently got 1.8 million in the bank and 1 free transfer. And in general, I'm very, very happy with the team. I could have some potential issues, and there are also 3 or 4 players that I'd like to take out. So let's go through it one by one. Starting with the defence, well, let's go the goalkeepers, actually. Dubravka seems to be fine. I think he's got his place for the time being anyway. Not a massive issue. And whilst Areola appears to have either lost his place or still not be fully fit because he was on the bench again, that's not a major issue for me. And I'll probably still be happy playing Dubravka in any given week, especially when a lot of the other goalkeepers have been disappointing too. So Dubravka absolutely fine in my team. The defence, if they're fit, in my opinion, is probably the best part of my team for blank game week 18. I think if you look at my defense, a lot of people will be jealous, especially the fact that I've got an Aston Villa defender in there. On top of that, I've got Taylor and Tsimikas on the bench. So, in general, the defense looks really, really good. I'm not going to go through every player in detail because I'll do that in my team selection video later in the week. But the only two potential issues I've got, Trippier actually picked up a knock against AC Milan, if you remember, but no one really spoke about it, and apparently he's not flagged either because of the suspension. I think everyone was focused on the suspension, but do remember that Trippier did pick up a knock. So let's see if he's in training. Let's see if that was genuinely just a knock or maybe a slightly more serious injury. Of course, if Trippier is out, I have a decision to make around whether I try to move for a Trent. Do I downgrade him all the way? Do I move for an Arsenal defender a little bit early and maybe play Taylor this week? So I've got a few decisions to make, but it may be that there's no major issue there. And then the other one was actually Pau Torres. So before you go out and buy him, and I do still think he's a great option if he's fit, he came off in the 81st minute, and there was a quote from memory which said that basically he picked up a small knock. And I think what his quoting was the red card to Kamara was much more of an issue than the injury to Pau. So I think Pau Torres' injury was very minor, if not precautionary. So hopefully that won't keep him out of blank game week 18. But of course, I'm not going to make an early move on any players in my team, considering that I need an update on Trippier's knock, and I need an update on the potential knock to Pau Torres too. So I would hope and maybe expect that neither of those are major issues. But if they are, whilst I do have Taylor and Tsimikas on the bench, it may be that I decide to use a transfer to deal with my defence. But outside of that, I'm actually really happy with it on paper, and fingers crossed, I'll have a back four of Dubravka, Porro, Trippier, and Pau Torres. If that is the case, so let's assume that the defence is fine. The rest of the attackers, let's start with the ones that I'm happy with. Son, Salah, Palmer, Saka, Watkins, all great. No way I'm removing any of them. I'm really, really happy with them. Most of them on penalties too, outside of Watkins. Just a great set of players that I think you would expect to have and want to have in most of your teams. That then leaves Martinelli, Darwin, and Alvarez. Martinelli, as I said, is actually starting to show signs of getting back to where he was, but the output's still not there. And I'm still not saying that he's up there as one of the better assets in FPL. He's just being a little bit less terrible. So do I want to hold on to him and hope that he continues to trend in the right direction? And he does like a goal at Anfield. Maybe I do. But it also feels a little bit like sunk cost fallacy and almost endowment effect. Like, I own him, so I want him to do well. And I've invested in him for so long to this point. Do I just keep a hold of him? Trying to think from a psychological perspective here. Am I doing the wrong thing by just holding on to him? And to be honest, there are a lot of midfielders that I'd quite like to own. One in particular, who's on the thumbnail, and we'll discuss in the next section. So maybe this is the time to remove Martinelli. But the fixtures after Liverpool really aren't that bad for Arsenal. So I'm going back and forth on that one there. Then I've got Darwin and Alvarez as the two up top. I know Alvarez blanks this week, and I straight away everyone will say, well, he blanks, just sell him. But we still don't know how long Haaland's out for. And if we get an update that's not great, or we still don't know if he'll be back for 19, I still think Alvarez as the number 9 on penalties and set pieces too is a great option. And to be honest, even once Haaland's back, he still has a lot of that stuff. He still has decent data. He still has good fixtures as well. Probably has an upcoming double game week. And he's still on a lot of set pieces. So maybe Alvarez isn't the best one to sell. I don't want the blank to bother me because I don't need to play him this week. So when you're giving me advice down below, and I would love to know down below what you think, don't let the blank this week put you off. Because as you can see, I don't really need him this week. I always have to bench one of my attackers anyway. But has he been disappointing? Absolutely. And from an output perspective, really not offered me very much. Darwin's been pretty similar though. And I mean, this man, like I said, I've loved owning him in FPL at points, but in recent weeks, it's almost becoming a bit too much now, to the point where it's not really fun or funny. And I've been saying for a while it's fun to own Darwin. It gets to a point where it's not fun anymore, and he really does need to start converting. And my worry is that Arsenal's not a good game. I've spoken about on so many occasions how good Arsenal are, and especially away from home from a defensive perspective. They are very, very good. So this is not a good fixture. I then think he'll be benched against Burnley in 19. And then, yes, once Salah goes off to AFCON, maybe Darwin becomes the main man. Maybe Darwin's even on penalties. But do I want to keep him for 3 or 4 weeks in the hope that he turns something on when Salah goes away to AFCON? I'm not sure. And so from a kind of players I want to sell in my team perspective, Darwin and Alvarez are bigger issues for me than Martinelli. And I never thought I would say that. In recent weeks, I've been really looking at Martinelli's spot and thinking that was a waste of a transfer. He's not been very good. But if I'm looking at which way players are trending and what I can see happening in the future, I can see a lot of managers in FPL wanting double Arsenal attack. I think once Salah and Son go off to their tournaments, I think Erdegaard will come into our thinking. Jesus has started to look a little bit better recently, and maybe even Martinelli. And I feel like I'm moving in the wrong direction by keeping Darwin and Alvarez and selling Martinelli. The only issue is, from players I want perspective, I want more of the midfielders than I do the forwards. So this is a classic case in FPL, and it's something that I've gone back and forth on a lot over the recent years is, do I sell the players I want to sell more, i.e. Darwin and Alvarez, and then bring in forwards that I want slightly less? Or do I sell the player that I want to sell slightly less and bring in the players that I want more? It's kind of, what do you prioritize? The players that you want to own or the players that you currently already own? And I think in general, my advice has always been you remove the bigger issues in your team. So maybe that would mean that I should remove a forward. But I'll leave this question to you guys down below in the comments. Please do. And I've got a little bit of time off this coming week, so I'm actually going to read through all of the comments this week, and I'll reply to as many as possible. Martinelli, Darwin, Alvarez is basically a case of bench one, start one, sell one. It's like kiss, marry, avoid, but in FPL terms here. So as you can see here, I would have to sell one of these three players. I can then bench one, but then I would also have to start one at the very least. So I'd love to know what you would do down below. Which of these players would you focus on removing? And I do have 1.8 million in the bank, so I can get to pretty much any player in those midfield spots and also the forward spots too. So that's the current team. Just to recap, if I have to sort out defensive issue, I will, but I'll try to avoid doing so. I'm happy with 5 of my attackers. One of Martinelli, Darwin, or Alvarez will probably be sold. I can't see myself taking a hit. So let's now take a look at my Gameweek 18 watch list. So taking a very brief look at my Gameweek 18 watch list, these are the players that I would like to bring into my team in some regard. Maybe not necessarily right this week, but they are in my thinking at least. We'll start with the defense. It is really an Arsenal defender, and I've said this now for about 4 or 5 weeks. And you could argue that I made a slight mistake going for Pau Torres instead of an Arsenal defender. But as I said, when you look at the data, Aston Villa actually conceded a lower XGC than Arsenal in Game Week 17. So maybe slightly unlucky not to come away with a clean sheet. And I also just think Game Week 18 against Sheffield United at home and then Game Week 20 against Burnley at home, they just look like such bankers for clean sheets. I wanted to go for Pau Torres. But I am still missing an Arsenal defender, definitely. So I think, realistically, if I do make a defensive move soon, it has to be for Gabriel or Saliba. But outside of that, I think with the injuries that Chelsea have, Colwill looks very, very nailed at the moment, or as nailed as you could be in that Chelsea back line. His attacking data isn't great, but he's decent for bonus points. And I do think Chelsea will keep clean sheets with the fixtures they've got coming up. And then other than that, I do still really like Konsa. Now, Konsa would probably be more tempting to me if Pau Torres was injured and I had to remove him. But also, is a double up of Konsa and Pau Torres alongside Watkins up top, that Aston Villa triplet could be really nice. And Aston Villa are defending very well at the moment. And with the midfielders like Bailey and Diaby, I think there are always risks associated with them. And then Douglas, Luiz and McGinn, they're fine, but they're not really my sort of FPL picks. So does a double up on the Aston Villa defence block me from anything? I'm not entirely sure it does. And so Konsa and Pau Torres alongside Watkins could be a really nice trio. So that is something that's tempting me as well. And obviously, that would then give me double Sheffield United at home, double defence against Sheffield United at home in Game Week 18. So that is very, very tempting if I make a defensive move. For the midfielders, I've tried to narrow this down to 4 players that I'm currently interested in. Of course, I do have a favourite at the moment, but I think Bailey, when fit, and when ahead of Diaby in the pecking order, which I think he is, his data's so good, and his output is exceptionally strong too. The issue is I just don't know how many minutes Diaby will still get, and I don't know how many minutes Bailey will get, especially because he's coming back from injury. I'm just not sure that he'll be risked too much. And will Diaby maybe get the slightly easier fixtures? Might we see Diaby get the fixtures that we would want Bailey to play in, such as maybe Burnley at home in Game Week 20? If that's the case, it's not really ideal. So I feel like there are maybe slightly too many expected minutes risks around Bailey. Gordon is Gordon. He continues to return, another attacking return at home in Game Week 17, and there's very little to dislike about him other than I don't think the fixtures are perfect coming up. And also, when you look at his data, and I know I drive home the point of data far too much, but he's not getting that many chances to score goals, and he's not creating that many chances either. He's finishing everything he gets. And when he creates chances, he's playing with the likes of Isak and Wilson, who tend to finish those chances. So maybe he doesn't have to put up the same data as others. But it almost feels like I'm getting on Gordon at the wrong time here. I almost feel like there maybe are other players that are about to go into a nice run of form and nice run of fixtures that are probably better to jump on. So I'm less keen on Gordon, but maybe it's just a bit of stubbornness on my part because I'm yet to own him this season and I've just not been convinced, but he still continues to get FPL returns. Bowen is a player that I love, and I think when Son and Salah go off to AFCON and the Asian Cup, Bowen is a player that I think a lot of us will look at in the midfield, but I'm not sure right now is the time to do it. Not a bad fixture against Man United in Game Week 18, but I do feel like, again, there are other players with slightly better fixtures over the short term. But around 20 or 21, I do think Bowen will come into our thinking. And again, he's just a player that has most of what you would want. Really, really nailed. Okay fixtures, decent data, very good goal threat. He's a player that I like a lot, but maybe just feels like less of a shiny new toy. I've already owned him this season. I've already removed him. I'm looking at other players instead. And as you can see, the player that I am interested in is RICHARLISON. Now, this isn't just because he returned again in Game Week 17. I spoke about him on my deadline stream. I just like a lot of what he's got. He's very greedy. Always has decent expected goals. And I'm looking at his data now from the last 2 game weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, he had 0.01 expected assist and 0.01 expected assist. So he creates nothing for his teammates, but he is greedy. 0.71 XG, 0.39 XG. He will get chances. He's a goal-mouthed striker, which is exactly what Postecoglou said. He's goal hungry. He wants goals, and he looks a little bit different coming back from his injury. And also his break, he was working with a psychologist as well to get over the fact that he hadn't scored again for Spurs. So I feel like with RICHARLISON, he's in a very good place mentally, physically looks in a good place, and he's also getting a lot of chances in this Spurs attack. On top of that, when Son goes off to the Asian Cup, I think RICHARLISON will be as much of a goal threat, if not more, because he'll be hogging absolutely everything. And there's a good chance he's on penalties as well. Even if Maddison's fit, I would argue RICHARLISON may well still take pens for Spurs. So RICHARLISON feels like a good short-term option, but also a pretty good long-term option as well, because I think once Son goes off to the Asian Cup in Game Week 21, RICHARLISON could be an even better pick. So I really do like him, and I think he's at a very, very reasonable price as well. Just lastly on the forwards, if I do end up taking out Alvarez or Darwin, this is my main issue with the forwards, is I'm not convinced by any of them. I would love to own Nkunku, but sadly, whilst he was on the bench against Sheffield United, he got 0 minutes. So maybe it was just a case of wanting to take him along with the team, get him used to going to Premier League games with the team, and he was never going to get any minutes. But he still feels like he's probably, 3, 4, 5 games away from getting a start. So he's probably out of the equation. Jesus is a player I would love, but I'm already on Martinelli and Saka. Do I want triple Arsenal attack against Liverpool? Not particularly. And I also really do want an Arsenal defender. And if, let's say, Martinelli continues to perform well, and I don't want to take him out, and then I've brought in Jesus and I've got Saka, well, then I've taken up my 3 Arsenal spots and I've got no room for a defender. So Jesus, in my particular situation, doesn't look great. I know you've got the likes of Isak, you've got the likes of Wilson too, but then I don't know who's going to start and who's going to stay fit. I know you could go for someone like Acuna if you wanted to. There are other options in the Premier League. But really, it probably just comes back to Solanke. And this isn't stubbornness with me. I still think he's a great pick. But Solanke and Bournemouth really had 3 good fixtures, and then they started to tail off. And the best one was Luton at home. They've now missed that fixture, and I don't know what's going to happen with that fixture, by the way. If it gets replayed soon, and he has a double game week coming up, I would love to have Solanke in. And if we get that confirmed before the Game Week 18 deadline, that Solanke does have a double game week coming up, then I will definitely bring him in. But outside of that, with the 2 fixtures that they've got, yes, they're okay, but beyond that, they're not great. And it just feels like a spot where, again, I've not missed the boat with Solanke, but I've missed the really good fixture that you wanted him for. And I just wonder, is he going to do that much better than my other 2? Or would I rather bring in a Richarlison or a Bowen or a Gordon or a Bailey in midfield? I feel like they're slightly better transfers. I just don't really like any of the forwards at the moment, in all honesty. So that's the position that I'm at. I would really love to know down below in the comments, what would you do with my team? I'll just go back to my team now. This is the way the team's currently looking. Let's assume for now that Trippier and Pau Torres are fine, or that I don't want to make a defensive transfer and I'll just play Taylor instead. What would you do with my attack? Martinelli, Darwin, Alvarez, who would you sell and why? And who would you bring in and why? I'm going to read all of the comments. I would love your input down below. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 18 transfer plans. Hopefully you did enjoy today's video. And if you did, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. Let's hit 110,000 before the end of the year. I would really, really appreciate the support. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.